Okay, let's finish this guitar. So for this video I need to make a pickguard, I need to drill some holes, I need to apply a finish to the guitar and then assemble it. So I'm going to start with the pickguard. What I've found is the easiest way to do this is just to iterate the design until you're happy with it on paper, and then I'll transfer that onto plastic just using some sticky tape. So 2 or 3 mil plastic for pickguards can be a bit of a pain to deal with because every blade that you use or every router bit that you have wants to either take a chunk out of it or to break off one of the sharp edges of the pickguard. So what I do for this is always to stick the plastic pickguard onto a piece of 6 mil plywood, and then I can just use my normal workshop tools to sand it, cut it and shape it. Okay, so on to string through body holes. So this is one of those things that is always a source of stress for me, and that's because I don't have a radial column drill. But what I'm using here is a Wolfcraft multi-angle drill guide, which has really been my salvation to getting consistent string through body holes. So I've modified it here slightly because it does come with springs on the plungers, but I've taken those off. But it's the best way that I have found to do consistent string through body holes. So I'm using a 3 mil bit to drill the string through holes, but then I'm using an 8 mil Forstner bit on the back to drill the holes for the ferrules. The reason I'm using the Forstner bit is that the point of the Forstner bit will fit really nice and snug into the 3 mil holes that I've drilled on the back and keep the bit dead in line so that I can drill the holes in the correct position. So then after drilling the holes for the neck, I can just move on to the jack plug. All of the guitars that I build have a jack plug that comes directly out of the back because for me that's by a mile the most logical place to have one. Now, I do most of my guitar playing sitting down. I think a lot of people do. So it's much easier to not have to deal with leads that are digging into the couch or whatever you're sitting on. And it's also a lot more comfortable than having something that comes out of the face of the guitar. So there you can see me just putting a very slight round over on the body of the guitar. I haven't done any carves on this guitar because again I want it to look clean and simple, but I also want it to be very obviously a Reimagined Telecaster. And one of the things I love about the Tele is the simplicity of the design. Okay, I'm going to spend a bit of time talking through how I did the finish now on the guitar, because for the rest of the video it's mostly assembly and you might have seen me do that before and I don't particularly have anything intelligent to add there. But I was on Luthier's Question Time just a couple of nights ago and somebody commented on there when I said that I hadn't recorded a huge amount of the finishing process to say I should have done that because it really might have been helpful for quite a few people. Now, I'm certainly no expert in using Crimson Guitar's finishing oil. In fact, it's the first time that I've ever used it, but I'm happy to share my experience and let you know how I got the finish that I got. So one of the things that I do know from making furniture for a few years is that the only thing that the finish does is to magnify the mistakes that you've made in your preparation. So the first thing that I do is to sand without skipping any grits from 120 up to 400. So I did 120, 180, 220, 320 and 400. Now the reason that I've gone to 400 before applying any oil is that the first 2 coats of oil that I'm applying is Crimson Guitar's penetrating oil, and that's much thinner than the high build oil. If I was going to start straight with the high build oil, I would have only sanded to 320. I applied 6 coats in total. The first 2 coats of penetrating oil, I applied the first one with 1500 grit wet and dry, and the second one with the 2000 grit wet and dry. These are the only 2 coats that I did on the same day. Everything else I left a day in between. So the first coat of high build oil I then applied with 5000 grit, and the remaining coats I just applied with tissue paper. In actual fact, that's not quite true. What I did find is that the last coat of high build oil gave me a slightly glossier finish that I wanted, so I did do one further coat, which I just rubbed in with 5000 grit, just to dial the sheen down a little bit. Any of you that follow my Instagram feed might have seen that I posted a picture of the guitar when it was looking its most glossy, but I did want to dial that back slightly because I'm also using Crimson Guitar's restorative oil on the fretboard, and I want the kind of levels of shine from the body and the fretboard to match. So the most critical lessons I suppose that I learned was how long to leave the oil on for before rubbing it off and how much you rub off. So this varied quite a lot. So when it was 18 degrees outside, I found that the high build oil needed about 12 minutes before it became tacky. And when it was 30 degrees outside, I only needed 5 minutes. This is the slightly tricky bit to try and explain now, and I wish I'd recorded a little bit more of it than I did. For the rubbing off process, the way that I found to get a result that I was happy with was not to furiously rub off everything that I'd just put on, but to rub it off with a bit of tissue paper with the grain, applying about the same pressure as I would if I was sanding the body with a bit of 120 grit paper, then to leave it another 10 minutes and come back and do the same process again. And after that second 10 minutes, what I found is that as you're rubbing the oil down with the tissue paper, it turns slightly misty and then kind of immediately glosses up again, but feels dry to the touch, so I know I haven't left too thick of a residue on there. And with that process and the time that I left in between coats, I haven't had any issues with curing, and in just a couple of days it was completely ready for assembly. So hopefully that's of some use to somebody out there. So please just take that as my own experience. I'm certainly, as I said, no expert in Crimson Guitar's finishing oil, but I am really happy with it and really happy with the results I got. And I've left in just a few different views here so that you can see how the finish looks from a few different angles. And thank you again to everybody that's taken the time to write a kind comment on my videos. This is really my first experience with YouTube, and I've found that the guitar building community is just a really friendly and supportive environment, and I do really appreciate that. So thanks again, and hopefully I'll have another episode soon.